He was with the people. He actually was the original marketplace ministry, right? Like he was
I
literally
love
in the
this.
marketplace. Hey, Zacchaeus, get down from that tree. I'm going to eat at your house today. He was with the people. And that pattern that you see is he was then moved with compassion and he met the need, whether that was healing,
Totally.
whether that was deliverance, whether that was feeding the 5,000. It was as simple as that. He was with the people, he was moved with compassion, and he met the need. And I think that's what marketplace ministry is all about.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Life and Leadership Podcast. I am so glad that you're here today. Now, if you're anything like me, you love sharing, encouraging, and inspiring things with all your friends. So if this podcast is serving you on your leadership journey, please be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with a friend so that we can see more people growing in their leadership potential. I know that you sharing really makes a difference. Now, joining me on the podcast today is my friend Rachel Aguirre. Now, Rachel is a managing director at a top Wall Street investment firm where she oversees research and development, innovation, and product strategy. She holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the College of Creative Studies at UC Santa Barbara and a master's in financial mathematics from Stanford University. So the girl is smart. She's also passionate about ministry, serves as a worship leader and songwriter at her local church. She and her husband Pablo and their 3 kids currently live in the Bay Area. She is a delight and one of my dear friends. I can't wait for you to jump into this conversation with us today. Okay, my friend Rachel, I am so glad you've joined me. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
It is mega fun. I laugh because I have so many amazing friends, many of which I have no idea how to explain what they do. Like for you, big picture, I just know that, you work for a really big investment firm on Wall Street and you're mega smart with numbers. And so tell me, like, just from a job perspective, what is it exactly that you do?
Sure, absolutely. So you're right. I work for, one of the top investing firms within Wall Street. And what I do is I lead product for our what's known as an exchange traded fund business. So that's everything from product innovation to education to thinking about what it is that investors need, kind of the full gamut end to end of how we think about bringing new products to market.
Okay, that sounds really awesome. I've got an English degree, so I can talk about Shakespeare, but new products to market. Now, you are also one of the most on fire believers that I know. Okay, how does a girl that loves Jesus end up in a Wall Street company? And more importantly, tell us a little bit about how you even ended up, number one, becoming a follower of Jesus. Number two, maintaining your faith in a world that is quite antithetical to some of the values that we hold as believers.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a lot there. It's
Yes.
quite the story. But what's really interesting whenever I kind of talk about my story is that I like to start by saying I actually didn't plan to become within the world of finance at all. My plan was to actually be a pianist, a professional musician. That's what I went to university for. That's what I was planning to do. But it's really interesting because God had.
Okay, hang
Yeah.
on. How did I not know this about you? You went to school
Yeah,
for piano?
I did. I was thinking,
Where did you go?
I went to the University of California, Santa Barbara. That's where I went to undergrad, and then I did Stanford for graduate school. But I was thinking I was going to be a concert pianist. That was my plan. And in fact, my sister actually is. So she did go down that path. But God had other plans for me. And it was really interesting because it was actually through a challenge and through a closed door that I
Oh, wow.
ultimately pivoted towards this direction. It was not on my radar really by any means. But it's so interesting because, we oftentimes love to quote that scripture about He's the God who opens doors that no man can shut. But
Yes.
we oftentimes don't talk about the second half, which is He's also the God that closes doors that no man can open.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
that's
Yeah.
oftentimes just as important as the open doors are the fun part, but sometimes it's the
Yes.
closed doors. And so what happened my first year at university is I unfortunately just had this awful, awful, cruel teacher within piano. And
Oh,
so I, kind of just was quite a difficult circumstance. But I remember, I will never forget, it was during, one week in the spring of my first year. And I just suddenly, it dawned on me, you know what? This isn't for me anymore. I don't like writing. I think I'll do math. I mean, it was like that's how much thought went into it. And so I, in 1 week's time, became a math major. And and what was so interesting is once I made that
wow.
decision, one open door after another, just unusual favor followed me. And I landed this highly sought after internship in New York my junior year. I still don't understand how, got into Stanford for graduate school to study financial mathematics. And all throughout it was like, okay, God, I get it now. You clearly want me in this space. You're opening these doors that I'd never be able to do myself. And that's really how it happened.
But there is sort of a correlation between music and math, isn't there, or
They
not?
do say there is, yes. And it was one of those things I do not over spiritualize this at all. God did not come down and the angels did not say you're going to do math. It was like, well, this is kind of, what I can do. It's easy for me. It's, like I said, I don't like to write term papers. And so I think I'll try math. That
Wow.
was about all
So
there
were
was to it.
you a believer at all of this point?
Yes, yes. And I actually, grew up as a believer. So from as little as I can remember, 5 years old, I accepted Jesus into my heart. And oh,
Really?
yeah. And, really come from a legacy of pastors, my parents and my mom in particular, who actually had a very miraculous salvation experience. But I had the benefit, and I oftentimes think about that testimony that each of us has of coming to Christ. Mine was really one of, okay, this isn't just my parents' faith, this is now my faith as well.
Wow. So you said your mum had a really radical salvation.
She did. She did. In fact, she grew up in a Jewish home where, the Bible was basically contraband, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
So,
Wow.
in fact, she loves to tell this story about when she was in high school. She was the number one debater of Christians. And so, no matter what people say, they may say, I want nothing to do with Jesus, I want nothing to do with the gospel. Don't believe it, because in fact, she was miraculously saved on Halloween night. And you'll need to have her come on here to tell her whole story.
Literally.
It's
I know. I'm
incredible.
already fascinated.
But yeah, so she was, as a result of becoming a Christian, she was really cut off from her entire family. So that was,
Wow.
but I will tell you, both of her parents ultimately came to Christ. So that too is a miracle story.
Okay, so you've got that. So then you grew up in a Christian
Yeah.
home, went to
Mm-hmm.
college as a Christian,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then went to grad school
Yeah.
as a
Mm-hmm.
Christian. But then again, you grew up in California, didn't
I
you?
did. Yes,
And then you went to New
I
York.
did.
So you
Uh-huh.
basically never really grew up in a very Christian subculture because you grew
No,
up in a very
not at
secular
all. And
world.
I will, tell you that from a very young age, I remember, whether it was my mom, whether it was teachers, other people at church, just over and over, I would get these words from them of, you are called to be set apart. Do not compromise. Do not turn to the right or to the left. And so I always knew, what, I can't touch that. I cannot, have a turning to the side for a moment. I cannot walk away from God type of thing, because I knew
Wow.
from a very early age, God had put this passion within my heart of his calling on my life. I didn't exactly know how that would look and how that would pan out. And there's still, of course, much more unfolding,
Yes.
but I knew I was called, I was set apart. And so, that straight and narrow way was for me.
Wow.
But it was
It
very
kept
hard
you.
because I was oftentimes left out of the fun,
Yeah,
you know?
that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking. Well, left out,
Yeah.
and you're in an industry and
Hmm.
career
Hmm.
that there isn't a whole lot of probably both women or
Hmm.
believers in
Hmm.
your world. I'm thinking
Hmm.
the last 20 years of your life seem
Yeah.
to have been like
Yeah.
that. Like, so how have you navigated that?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely, 100%. It really does require this strength of understanding who you are and why you're here. And, it's really only through trials and through challenges that you begin to build that strength. And, it's so funny, and you might appreciate this. For the longest time, I just had the hardest time really understanding what James was talking about in James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4. He says, "Consider it pure
Pure
joy,
joy.
my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds." Okay, thank you, James. Not just one kind. We're going to face many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And I just remember, like, hold up. Let's be honest here. That's not fun. I'm sorry. I'm not understanding the joy in this. This is hard. These are storms. This is a fire. This is, a valley that I'm walking through, whatever it might be. Um, and I remember so clearly that the Lord just spoke to me, and he said, "No, no, think of it like childbirth." And you'll recognize, you'll
Yeah.
understand this, Christine, and all the mamas who may be out this will understand that labor is about the most painful thing you
Yeah.
can go through. And I don't know about you, but with my three kids, I was kicking, I was screaming, I was like, what in the world is happening to me? I want nothing to do with this. But the moment that you hold that baby in your arms, it's like it's all forgotten. It's so funny. Now I
Right.
can actually look back on it with fondness, like, what in the world? And then you do it again and you have another one. But that it finally clicked for me there. It is in those challenges that something is produced, that perseverance is produced, that just otherwise, wouldn't be there. And so, yeah, I faced a lot of challenges. And gratefully, I'm so thankful that, at the company that I work for, they're all about empowering women, but that is absolutely not the case in so many places. It is a male, and continues to be, fairly male dominated industry. And so there were many times that, I was shut down. I was told to be quiet. I was told not to speak. I was, cast off.
Were you literally actually told that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So tell me,
Hmm.
because I'm thinking that people are saying, like, especially out in the
Hmm.
marketplace, there's so much women's empowerment, and
Yeah.
there are a lot more women in the room than have ever been in the room. But is it still predominantly a male world at your level of what you're doing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there continues to be much more progress that needs to be made. I will say, even from 20 years ago, it's hard to believe I've actually been in this for 20 years now. We've come a long way. So in the early days, it was really blatant and pretty, just not. It's gotten a lot better since then, but you still don't see the levels of representation that you might otherwise expect.
Right.
You still see that women have to, like, walk this really fine line of wanting to be a leader but not being perceived as too, you know like, just being able to be a female and being who you are and being a leader is still, quite a challenge for women. And so it takes resilience, it takes grit. You really have to know why you're there. And for me personally, it's more than just a job, it's a call, and that's what keeps me going.
Yes. And so when you face, or tell us maybe some of the examples of challenges or resistance practically, what does it look like? So here you are, you're walking into an office, I'm saying
Hmm.
over a 20-year
Hmm.
period.
Hmm. Hmm.
What might it look like
Hmm.
to say, okay, well, this is what I as a woman had to
Yeah.
overcome that actually none of my male
Sure,
peers would have had
absolutely.
to
A
overcome?
perfect example. I might share something in a meeting and have an idea, and, no response. 1 minute later, a guy may say exactly the same thing. Oh, great idea. Let's do it. Absolutely. Right. So, I mean, that's something that women face all the time. Just even being around the table and included in certain things, I think, is something that women, can struggle with.
Okay.
So, I would say nowadays it might be take more subtle forms. It's not the, we don't want to hear from you directly, but it can be those more subtle forms of, well, I'm not really going to listen to your idea, but I will listen to it if it comes from a male colleague.
Right. Wow. So tell me, how have you navigated? Because you're married with children. I love your husband. Great kids. We've had dinner.
Yeah.
Uh, how have you navigated? Because to do what you do at the level that you do it,
Hmm.
it requires a lot of hours. I mean,
Hmm.
you're not clocking in at 9 and clocking off at 5. Like, I know you and I know your
Hmm.
life. So how have you guys navigated all of that to the point that you still have a marriage where you genuinely love each other and are committed to each other? Your children know their mother and love their mother. How have you balanced all
Hmm.
of that?
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you really the only way we've been able to do it is because of Pablo's willingness to actually
Yes.
be at home. I mean, he is
Yeah.
primarily the one who's making sure all the logistics are happening. He's, picking up the kids, taking them here, taking them there, and allowing me to kind of, do the amount of work that's required, but then B, have that quality time, and
Yes.
not, so there's no way I would have been able to do it, or, without him. It is 100% a partnership. And,
Yes.
I oftentimes tell him he has just as much of a part in what I do
Yeah.
as I do. Both are
Yes.
critical to accomplishing what it is that we do. And a win for me is a win for him, and a win for him is a win for me, and we're in it together. And I commend him for his
Yeah.
willingness to, do something that, others may feel is a little bit less traditional.
So I get that 100,000%. And I think within the context of the conversation we're having, um, it is so important because we married for calling
Yes.
and for purpose.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the actual task or function is,
Yes.
that could change tomorrow.
Absolutely.
What we're so, but in many, particularly places of faith, Christian
Hmm.
spaces, this would not be a
No.
traditional sort of role. How have you faced any sort of, I don't know, resistance or questioning would be more the thing? And how have you navigated that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for him, it actually takes a real man who
Yeah, I
understands
agree.
who he is in Christ to be
Yes.
able to face those questions and answers those questions, and like, oh, wait, what? You do this and not that? And, so to me, it's really a reflection of kind of his security of who he is. Because, yes, absolutely, there are questions. But what's interesting is more often than not, the response that we do get, particularly from younger people, is, oh wow, that's actually really cool.
Well, totally.
It's something that kind of opens up the aperture of what's possible. And actually, partnership is a partnership, the man and the
Totally.
woman together. So yeah.
And it shows the value
Yeah.
that you do place on marriage and
Absolutely.
family. I would say Nick and I have had shifting roles
Yeah.
even in our own marriage. The first 6 years, Nick was a banking and finance major, which is why I love what you do in that whole big area. And so he worked and, ran a little company while I was traveling and preaching and doing evangelism. And it worked great. Then I was pregnant with Catherine. And we knew that we wanted to do this together. Like I couldn't keep traveling,
Yeah.
and so Nick then came on board and was very behind the scenes. But the
Hmm.
only way I could do what I did
Hmm.
was because I had the security. Who else other than the other parent would I trust with my daughters?
Absolutely. Yes.
And because we saw that we had one life, the
Hmm.
life that was to be found
Yes.
in
Yes.
Christ. Part of that life, we were married, we were parents, we had the ministry God had called us to. So it wasn't compartmentalized like everybody would do. It
Exactly.
was so integrated.
That's so true. And sometimes I even feel like that word balance gets
Oh,
misused. I don't even know
totally,
that I really
totally.
like it, but
I don't like, I could tell you I don't.
yeah.
Yes.
But at
Yeah.
the very least, if I'm going to use that word, I use it much more like a verb than a noun. Like, I don't think
Right.
it's something to be achieved. It's something that can, take you take action. You have to constantly check in and, like, how is this going? Who needs more of my attention now?
Exactly.
Is it the kids? Is it one of my kids? That's something I'm constantly having to kind of touch base on. Is it my husband? Is it the ministry at church? Is it the ministry in the marketplace that I have? But so it is a
Yeah, I love that you're saying that. I think this is setting people free because
mhm,
it wasn't really until I moved to America
mhm.
and I thought, oh, wow, over here, there are clearly defined
Yeah.
cultural Christian expectations of roles, very different to Africa or
Right.
villages in
Right.
Asia or, or historical biblical Christianity.
Yes.
I'm like, wow, there are things here that you're calling sort of gender role stereotypes that you're saying are
Yeah.
biblical or Christian that are actually just cultural.
Mhm.
And it's, in fact, if you were sort of white, middle, upper class, you could fit into those roles really well. But, other than that, and I just look at our role as my girls moved into their teenage years. Well, Nick took on then a far more a CEO role in the ministry and the organization. And I stepped back. I was very visible in terms of my preaching and
Right.
teaching, but I was way more
Mhm.
available at home, like in a different way. People wouldn't know because they still saw me
Right.
visibly. But because that, I love what you said about balance. That's what my girls needed
Yes.
way more in those
Mhm.
years. Well, now Soph's about to go to Paris for school. Catherine's almost finished college. We're in a whole different way. So we're
Totally.
kind of looking at, okay, what are our roles even in the ministry? It's never ending. I'm about to hit 60 in a couple of, it's not ending, but the goal is Jesus and the
Absolutely.
call, not
Absolutely.
the actual
That's
function
right.
in this
That's
moment of
right.
who's got what title and who does what.
Mhm.
And I see that working in your
Mhm.
life, and
Mhm.
which means that you're fulfilling what God's called you to do on this earth.
Exactly. Exactly.
Basically.
Yes.
So I love watching you and Pablo
Mhm.
and your kids because, but I do realize also it's pioneering,
Yes.
and some people even listening to this conversation are like,
Whoa.
whoa, Chris, that's a bit out there. But the majority are
Mhm.
going, oh wow,
Mhm.
you mean I have the freedom?
Mhm.
Because basically, it's not that you're putting your career before
No.
Pablo. You and Pablo are deciding what the call of God is for your family.
100%. 100, and that is the thing. It is a ministry. It is a calling. And I think sometimes people
Yeah,
can get that mixed up as well. I mean, I think, there
totally.
can be this view of, well, ministry's in the church and then I have my job over here and that's different. No, not at all.
No. That's why we're doing this podcast, because I'm introducing everyone to my friends like you who are my go to
Mhm,
people for like prayer
mhm,
or let's believe
mhm,
God. And people
mhm.
are like, what? You mean someone that's sort of in a, Fortune 100 company in the middle of the Wall Street world? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
What were Daniel? What were Joseph? I mean, you don't put on your Christian cap and then you're this cap. You're
Absolutely.
always a
Well,
Christian.
how about the ministry of Jesus? I mean, you really have to
Hello.
look no further than him. I mean, he was with the people. He actually was the original marketplace ministry, right? Like, he was
I
literally
love
in the
this.
marketplace. Hey, Zacchaeus, get down from that tree. I'm going to eat at your
That's
house
right.
today. I mean, he was with the people. And that pattern that you see is he was then moved with compassion and he
Yeah,
met the need, whether that was healing,
totally.
whether that was deliverance, whether that was feeding the 5,000. It was as simple as that. He was with the people, he was moved with compassion, and he met the need. And I think that's what marketplace ministry is all about.
Absolutely. And the fact is that we're called to be in the world, but not of it. We're called to be in
Absolutely.
a real world. Uh, Daniel served under several administrations, and but he purposed not to defile himself.
Mhm.
He purposed to stay
Mhm.
true to God. So it is possible to do that. And for you
Mhm.
personally, how the whole culture of the world that you're in, generally
Mhm.
the whole industry that you're in,
Mhm.
is not necessarily people are not necessarily putting Jesus
Oh,
first
not at
or
all. Like,
biblical
not at all.
standards first. I'm trying to be really nice in all of this, you know,
Yeah.
biblical
Mhm.
values. So for
Mhm.
you, how is there not a cognitive dissonance to go, okay, I'm working in a
Mhm.
world where some of the greater values in the broader world that I'm involved
Mhm.
in are
Mhm.
antithetical
Mhm.
to the gospel
Mhm.
that I
Mhm.
believe. How do you navigate it? In
Mhm.
very much like how did
Mhm.
Daniel navigate it in
Mhm.
Babylon?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I think Daniel's such a perfect example because, like you say, he was under, and you like you say, several administrations. He was
Yes,
in Babylon. He was in the midst, but he did
totally.
not eat of the food. He did not
Yeah,
defile himself. And that's really the kind of frame under which I've thought about it as well. We are in the world, but we are not of it. We are,
yeah,
of another kingdom. And I actually love to think about myself. I think it was Paul in Ephesians who said, I'm an ambassador for
yes,
Christ. And that's what I see my role as, where, I'm not of this place, but I am representing. That's what an ambassador does. They represent a
totally.
country or a kingdom on foreign soil.
Yeah,
And that's how I view my role and my purpose where I am. I'm an ambassador. I'm representing another kingdom. And so I may be in Babylon, but I'm representing heaven. And so it's about, it's so 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 important. Like, if I could just underscore having integrity yourself, because I will tell you, people are watching. They watch much more than what you say, what you do. And, I've been now 20 years, and in fact, most of that time all with the same company, with a lot of the same
right,
people. And so they see you, that you're developing relationships with these people. They see you in the good times, they see you in the bad times, they see how you respond to stress, they see how you respond to crises. And you know what? That eventually begins to form a stark differentiation. How are you so calm under what
wow,
is a crisis? Why is it that you don't, stab someone behind the back? Why
yeah,
is it that you're not gossiping about others? Like, that eventually begins to speak volumes. And I also think that's what Paul was talking about when he said, You are an epistle read
a
by
living letter.
men.
Yes,
We actually are, for some people, the only Jesus they will ever see is us. They're maybe not
totally.
going to set foot in darken the doorstep of a church or read the Bible until they first see us. And so we're really on the front lines there. And so,
So tell
yeah.
me then, in an
Hmm.
industry where, often we see things in the newspapers generally
Hmm.
about that bigger world where there are people cutting
Hmm.
corners or doing something to get ahead. How do you stay true when you're in a position where nobody might even ever know that what you've done might not be entirely ethical, or you could just cut a
Hmm.
corner? But it's the difference between you could really
Hmm.
have a massive bonus
Hmm.
or not
Hmm.
massive
Hmm.
bonus based on the decision you make right now. How have you kept true in that?
The fear of God. I mean, right?
That's powerful.
I mean, I think that's what it
Yeah,
comes down to is, well, first of all, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And
right,
so it's so important. And it's not just money, but it's so important that we don't get entangled in the
right.
trappings of Babylon, right? Whether it be money,
Yeah,
whether it be position, whether it be fame. We have to every day die to ourselves and recall to our memory what it is that we're there for. And that
right,
integrity is fundamental. The fear of God is fundamental to saying, no, I will not do what is wrong. I will not cut that corner, even if it means I'm not going to get the promotion.
right,
I go back to it is God. From the very beginning, I've never felt like I've got to make this thing happen because
right,
it's God who opens the door that no man can shut. And it is God who puts his favor on us. It's not
yeah,
something that we can strive for or try to achieve. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world yet lose his soul? It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
not worth it.
What is
Do
worth it
you
is the
truly
treasure in
believe
heaven.
Do you believe that God has taken you further than you could have taken
Oh,
yourself?
100%. I shouldn't be there. I mean, let's go all the way back to like, I shouldn't have gotten into Stanford. I am not that smart. Like, let's just make that clear. I'm not that smart.
No.
No, time and again, and promotion. And um, I mean, I've just been along for the ride. And hey, let's not get this wrong. I've worked hard. I've
Yes.
done my homework. I've, spent countless hours. Like excellence actually really does matter.
Yeah.
Everything we do, we're going to do it as unto the Lord. We're going to do it with all of our
Yeah.
might, but then it's up to Him, you know, the
Yeah.
doors that He
So
wants to
you've
open.
never lost sight of that ultimately it's up to God.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
100%. We got to wrap up, but I do want to just go here as our final
Mhm.
thing, because I think a lot of people would kind of go, well, it's great. You kind of just have all the favor and you never have to face any challenges and it's not hard. But, this last year has been a challenging year for
Mhm.
you. And I just love you to whatever degree you want to share, whatever, and just how you've navigated
Mhm.
um, kind of coming to terms with your own limitations
Mhm.
and still depending on a supernatural God to get you
Mhm.
through in the world that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, so you're absolutely right. I went through the hardest challenge of my life to date over
Mhm.
these last, call it 4 or 5 months.
Yeah,
I had just, and this, it was the least of all the types of challenges that one could have. I don't want an issue with my health. And that's exactly what happened. And, for
yeah,
4 months, I just had these awful, awful, awful symptoms. I mean, won't scare you with all the
yeah.
details, but we had no idea what was happening with me. And, that not knowing maybe was the worst part of all. And month after month, and going to one doctor, then another doctor, then another doctor. And, when I talk about like, that struggling with understanding the joy of going, it's like, Lord, why? Why? I know you're with me. I know you're with me. I know it up here in my mind, but I need to feel it in my heart. And He walked me through. And I thank the Lord that we did get to the bottom. I mean, effectively my body was attacking itself.
Yeah.
And I'm also grateful for the medical community. God
Amen.
works
Yeah,
miracles in many different
totally.
ways. But while at the beginning I wanted Him to just pick me up and rescue me from this, He had another thing in mind. He actually wanted to walk me through it. And what I'm so, so, so grateful for, and what became so clear to me, is that we may walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but He doesn't cause us to dwell there you know
Beautiful.
and there's something that comes out on the other side that is of great value, gems, diamonds. There's something that you can only really gain. And I would just encourage people, if you're going through something right now, know that whether it's a fire, He's the fourth man in the fire. Whether it's a
Yeah.
storm, He's in your boat. Or if you're going through a valley, He is your shepherd, and He is going to get you through it. And you will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, and it's going to become part of your testimony. So, like I said, life is full of challenges, but actually, we're going to consider it pure joy. There's something He's going to produce on the other side of it.
On that note, I think we have to say yes and amen. So not only do you play the piano, not only are you a math genius and working in a Wall Street kind of company, but you also are a great preacher, girl. Okay, so I love you dearly.
Love
Thank you
you so
so
much.
much. I know you've inspired so many young women to be able to know that you can be in the upper echelons of the finance sector, that world, and still stay true and faithful to Jesus
Yes.
and fulfill your calling. So thanks for being such a role model and example. I love you
Oh,
dearly, my
love
friend.
you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, so you know why I love Rachel, and I know that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Rachel's details are listed and tagged in the description of this episode, so you can keep up with her and connect further. And to you, our listeners, I want you to know that I just so love and appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Life and Leadership Podcast. Now, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and be sure to share this with a friend that you want to encourage today. I cannot wait to see you back here next week.
Access more